The table was already crowded before I sat down. Plates overlapped. Glasses were set too close together. Elbows brushed whenever someone reached for bread. It was the kind of family dinner where everyone talked a little louder than necessary, not because they were happy, but because silence made things uncomfortable. My name is Lily. I had arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Not dramatically. Just enough to avoid being the first one seated, just enough to slide in quietly and observe before being observed. I took the empty chair near the end of the table, next to my cousin Zunri, who offered me a sympathetic smile without saying anything. Across from me sat my sister Elaine. She was glowing. That was the word my mother had used earlier, and for once it fit. Elaine had always known how to take up space, how to draw attention without asking for it. Tonight, she didn't even try to hide it. She sat straight, shoulders back, her hand resting casually on the arm of the man beside her. "This is Shin," she said for the third time that evening, laughing lightly. "My fiancé." Shin nodded politely each time, patient, composed, the kind of man who didn't need to speak much to be noticed. His posture was controlled, his movements deliberate. He wore confidence the way some people wear expensive watches effortlessly. "He's a ranger," Elaine added, her voice lifting just enough for it to carry down the table. My father raised his eyebrows in approval. My mother smiled proudly, as if Elaine's achievement were also hers. "A ranger," Dad repeated. "That takes discipline." Shin inclined his head. "It does." Elaine glanced at me then. Not directly, just enough to include me in the comparison she was already making in her head. Dinner continued. Stories were shared. Laughter rose and fell. I listened more than I spoke, answering questions when asked, keeping my tone even, my expressions neutral. I'd learned long ago that anything I said could be twisted into either indifference or defensiveness, depending on what Elaine needed in the moment. Halfway through the meal, my aunt asked me, "So, Lily, how's work?" "Fine," I said. "Busy." Elaine laughed softly before anyone else could respond. "Busy doing what?" she asked, tilting her head. "You're still at that same place, right?" I nodded. "Yes." She turned to Shin, smiling. "See, he's always on assignment. Training, deployments, responsibility. Real structure." There it was. The comparison landed lightly, disguised as conversation, but it hit exactly where she intended. I felt my mother shift uncomfortably. My father cleared his throat, but said nothing. I met Elaine's eyes calmly. "Different paths," I said. She smiled wider. "Of course. I just mean, some people thrive under pressure." Shin looked between us, sensing the shift but not intervening. The table quieted just a little. Elaine lifted her glass, still smiling. "I'm just saying, it's nice to finally be with someone who has direction. Someone who pushes me to be better." She took a sip. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I'd learned that responding in moments like this only gave her what she wanted, proof that she'd gotten under my skin. Zunri glanced at me, eyebrows raised slightly, a silent "Are you okay?" I nodded once. Elaine leaned back in her chair, satisfied. She'd made her point. Then it happened. As she set her glass down, her elbow clipped the edge of the table. The movement was small, almost unnoticeable, but the effect was immediate. The glass tipped, liquid spilling across the tablecloth, sliding toward the stack of napkins, splashing dangerously close to Shin's sleeve. "Oh," Elaine gasped, jumping up. "I'm so sorry." Chairs scraped. My mother rushed for towels. Someone laughed nervously. Shin stood, calm but alert, stepping back to avoid the spill. "It's fine," he said. "No harm done." Elaine fussed, apologizing repeatedly, her composure shaken just enough to draw attention. In the chaos, no one noticed me stand. I picked up my bag quietly, pushed my chair back without a sound, and walked toward the hallway. "Lily," my mother called, distracted. "Can you help?" "I'm heading out," I said, my voice steady. Elaine looked up, surprised. "Already?" "Yes." "But dessert." "I'm not staying," I said. The room paused. Not because I raised my voice. Because I didn't. I walked past the doorway, slipped on my coat, and opened the front door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and grounding. Behind me, I heard my father say my name again. I didn't turn around. As I stepped outside, I realized something with startling clarity. Elaine thought the moment she'd changed everything was when she spoke. She was wrong. The moment that changed everything was when I chose not to stay. I didn't go home that night. I drove until the streets thinned and the noise inside my head finally quieted enough to think. I pulled over near a closed park, turned the engine off, and sat there with my hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I was clear. When my phone buzzed, I didn't look at it right away. I knew who it would be. I knew the order too, first my mother, then my father, then Elaine, each message more carefully worded than the last. I checked the screen eventually. Mom, are you okay? You left so suddenly. I typed, erased, typed again. I'm fine. I needed space. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Elaine didn't mean anything by it, she wrote. She was nervous. Nervous had always been the excuse. I put the phone face down and drove to a small hotel near my office. I checked in with only my ID and a credit card, grateful for anonymity. The room was plain, quiet, neutral, exactly what I needed. The next morning, the messages stacked up. Dad, come by later. Let's talk this out. Elaine, you embarrassed me last night. That one made me pause. Embarrassed. Not I'm sorry. Not I crossed a line. Just embarrassment, hers. I showered, dressed, and went to work. At my desk, I moved through the day like muscle memory took over. Emails answered. Meetings attended. Notes taken. No one there knew about the dinner or the way a single sentence had landed after years of accumulation. At lunch, Zune recalled. I saw what happened, she said quietly. You okay? I am, I replied. And this time, it was true. She crossed a line, Zunri said. Again. I know. She wanted a reaction. I know. And you didn't give her one. That's the point. That evening I agreed to meet my parents, but not at the house. We sat in a quiet cafe, neutral ground. My mother arrived first, hands wrapped tightly around her cup. My father joined us a few minutes later, expression serious. You left everyone confused, Dad said. I left because I was clear, I replied. Mom frowned. Elaine was just excited. She didn't mean to compare. She did, I said calmly. And she's done it before. Dad sighed. You're reading too much into it. No, I said. I'm finally reading it correctly. They exchanged a glance. Shin didn't feel comfortable, Mom added. He asked if he'd done something wrong. I shook my head. This isn't about him. Then what is it about? Dad asked. It's about the way Elaine uses moments like that to measure herself against me, I said. And the way you both let it happen. Mom's eyes filled. We don't let anything happen. You don't stop it, I replied gently. There's a difference. Silence settled between us. Dad leaned back. What do you want from us? I considered the question carefully. I want honesty, I said. Not smoothing things over. Not minimizing. I want acknowledgement. Mom nodded slowly. We can do that. Can you? I asked. Because acknowledgement means changing how you respond when she does it again. Dad didn't answer. That was answer enough. I stood. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just stepping back. Mom reached for my hand. Please don't disappear. I'm not, I said. I'm choosing when to be present. That weekend, the story traveled without me. Elaine told it her way. About how she was excited. About how I was sensitive. About how the drink spilled and ruined the mood. She left out the comparison. She left out the laugh. She left out the way the table went quiet. Shin, to his credit, didn't add to it. When he texted me later, his message was brief. I didn't know she'd say that. I'm sorry. I replied honestly. I know. This isn't about you. A few days later, Elaine called me directly. Why are you making this such a big deal? She demanded. You walked out like a child. I walked out like an adult, I replied. I removed myself from a situation where I wasn't being respected. She scoffed. Respected? Lily, it was a joke. It wasn't, I said. And even if it were, jokes land differently when they punch down. She went quiet. You think you're better than me now? She asked. No, I said. I think I'm done competing. That's not what this is, she snapped. It is, I replied. It always has been. She hung up. The weeks that followed felt lighter in ways I hadn't expected. I declined invitations politely. I answered messages when I wanted to, not when guilt demanded it. I noticed how often my body had braced itself before family interactions and how that tension eased when I stopped forcing proximity. And something else changed too. Without me there to absorb discomfort, it lingered. At the next family gathering, one I skipped, Elaine tried the same tone with someone else. Zunri later told me the room went awkwardly quiet, the laughter late and forced. She didn't know how to recover, Zunri said. You usually smooth it over. That realization hit harder than any argument could. I wasn't just the quiet one. I was the buffer. And buffers hide damage. A month after the dinner, my father called again. This isn't working, he said. The distance. It's working for me, I replied. He paused. Elaine's been difficult. I didn't respond. We didn't see how much you balance things, he continued. How often you redirected conversations. I learned early, I said. Someone had to. He exhaled. What would it take for you to come back around more? I thought of the table. The laugh. The comparison. It would take accountability, I said. Not apologies in private. Accountability in the moment. He was quiet for a long time. I don't know if Elaine's ready for that, he admitted. Then neither am I replied. When I hung up, I didn't feel sad. I felt aligned. Because the truth had finally surfaced, not with a speech or confrontation, but with absence. The dinner hadn't ended the way Elaine planned. It hadn't elevated her. It had exposed the role I'd been playing all along. And once I stepped out of it, the imbalance had nowhere left to hide. The shift didn't announce itself. It crept in through small, uncomfortable moments, pauses that lingered too long, jokes that didn't land, glances that searched for someone who wasn't there to smooth things over. At the next family gathering, Elaine arrived early and left late. She filled the room with stories about Shin's training schedule, his discipline, his future. The tone was familiar, proud, elevated, comparative, but without me present, there was no counterbalance. When she laughed, it echoed. When she made a comment that edged too close to judgment, it sat there, undiluted, unsoftened. Zunri told me later that the room had gone quiet more than once. She kept waiting for someone to jump in, Zunri said. Usually that's you. I knew. Weeks passed. I didn't avoid anyone. I simply didn't volunteer myself. I stopped preemptively explaining. Stopped translating moods. Stopped carrying the unspoken responsibility of keeping things pleasant. My parents felt it first. My mother called one evening, voice tentative. Dinner's been different. In what way? I asked. Quieter, she said. Tenser. I let the silence hold. She doesn't mean to sound the way she does, Mom added. Elaine. I know, I replied. Meaning isn't impact. My father took longer to reach out. When he did, it wasn't to argue. We watched the video, he said. What video? The one from the dinner, he replied. Your aunt recorded part of it. We hadn't seen it before. I closed my eyes. We heard the comparison, he continued. The laugh. The tone. I didn't say anything. We didn't stop it, he said quietly. We should have. That was new. I won't defend it, he added. Not anymore. A few days later, Elaine called. Not angry. Not triumphant. Measured. I didn't think it sounded like that, she said. Like what? I asked. Like I was putting you down, she replied. You were, I said gently. She exhaled. I didn't mean to. I know, I said. But intent doesn't erase pattern. There it was the word she avoided. Pattern. I was nervous, she tried. I wanted Shin to think I came from something solid. I waited. And you used me as contrast, I finished for her. She didn't deny it. I didn't realize you carried it, she said. All those years. I did, I replied. Because someone had to. There was a long pause. I don't want us like this, she said. Then it can't stay like it was, I answered. Another pause. Then, quieter. What does that look like? It looks like you stopping the comparisons, I said. In public. In private. And it looks like mom and dad stepping in when you forget. That's not fair, she said reflexively. It's necessary, I replied. She didn't argue. At the next dinner I attended, nothing dramatic happened. That was the point. Elaine introduced Shin without embellishment. No glances in my direction. No laugh sharpened to a point. When conversation drifted toward work, my father asked me questions and listened to the answers. When Elaine veered too close to old habits, my mother gently redirected. Once. Twice. Each time, Elaine noticed. So did I. After dessert, Elaine spilled a drink again. It was minor, just a splash on the table. She laughed nervously, apologized, reached for napkins. No one rushed. No one smoothed. No one made it into a moment. She handled it herself. Later, as I put on my coat, she touched my arm. Thank you for coming, she said. And for not carrying it anymore. I met her eyes. That's the only way it changes. When I stepped outside, the air felt familiar, cool, steady, honest. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Finished explaining. Finished absorbing. Finished being the quiet counterweight to someone else's need to shine. At that dinner, Elaine had laughed and compared. She thought that moment would define me. Instead, it defined the end of something I'd been holding for too long. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't confronted her publicly. I hadn't demanded apologies. I had simply walked away. And when I did, the truth followed.